Thanks, Quentin. Thanks, Jennifer. It's great to be here with you on the pod. My name's Neil Metzler, born and raised in Seattle. I moved internationally in big tech to London and Berlin, and I've now founded a data analytics startup in sports media and entertainment called Omnisent Sports. We are excited to be here and talk with you today.
Yeah, why don't you share your background as like a sports fan? Like why sports data and analytics out of all the things you could have done?
Yeah, I grew up playing basketball, tennis, fencing, squash. I really needed sports to get my energy out as a kid, like running around. Yeah, only child, like high energy, only child, right? As I grew into a young adult and I moved away from home for college, staying connected with the Seattle sports teams, especially the Seattle Seahawks, was an anchor for me. Listen to the radio broadcasts and watch the like live stats ticker on my laptop in my dorm. Yeah, that was just something where I always had something to talk about with my parents and my uncles and my aunts, and it kept me grounded, kept me with that sense of place, sense of identity, even as I moved to Boston for university, then Germany, then Beijing. So I've lived in four, five, six different countries now, but that string with sports has always stayed strong for me.
When you were thinking about building something on your own, you wanted to go back to that kind of place that had given you so much emotional resonance. Can you tell us a little bit about your founder's journey, how you decided to start Omniscient?
Yeah, it started as a passion project about 6 years ago. I wanted to explore social sentiment around the Seattle Seahawks legendary head coach, Pete Carroll, at that time. And there was a controversy that was tearing the fan base apart, whether to keep the legendary head coach and move or trade the star quarterback, Russell Wilson, or to let Russ cook and move on from Pete. I was listening to podcasts every night, and I felt like I wasn't getting the full picture. I wanted to hear if other people in the fan base also felt like me and to really understand at an every fan level, not at an expert analyst level or like a podcast host level, how people really felt. I had been working at Amazon on a trend detection engine for fashion, and I'd been on a technical journey of upskilling myself for Amazon Web Services and cloud computing. So I thought, why don't I take some of these data analytics approaches that I'd been using for fashion or for e-commerce and apply them to my favorite team? And so I coded a small app in Python. I made some simple API calls. It was very manual. It was not elegant, but it worked. So I ran this tracking app for 2 years about fan sentiment on Pete Carroll. And in the end, I published a blog post about it on the SB Nation blog roll. I think connecting it back to the community was a big step because it went from being a technical project into part of the cultural conversation about the team. And the feedback that I got from friends, from family, and even from folks that I'd never met before really made me feel like I wasn't the only one who was curious what everyone was thinking. And that shared emotional resonance around what do we do as a fan base really stuck out to me. So at the time, I was still working full time. I didn't take any next steps at that time. And I ended up coming back to the idea a few years later.
Yeah. So you and I had the opportunity to meet actually in an angel investing community, and that's how we found each other. Why don't you share a little bit of how Omniscient was operating before Omniscient and Rising Tide Partners had the opportunity to start working together?
So I had completed a 6 month incubator program. And in parallel with that, I was taking baby steps in angel investing and wrote my first check via the Hustle Fund Angel Squad network, which you and I are both a part of. This was like a self-paced learning for myself, both of these things, doing the incubator and writing my first angel check, because I knew I wanted to take a step forward in my career. I thought that might be an entrepreneurial leadership, and I wanted to explore possibilities without making like an all or nothing huge jump. So, yeah, I programmed a few things into my H1, and I actually ended up putting in my notice at my full-time job by end of February. So, yeah, I had like a smooth crossover into getting really serious about this idea and the idea of moving deeper into startups. But the kind of fear factor for me was also not that high because I'd been working in the AWS startups organization. So I had been tasked with engaging CTOs, VPs, and directors of engineering and directors of data about their technology strategy and how to create business value from tech. So I had been in some of the rooms where very talented leaders were making difficult decisions. And I think that if you can see it, you can be it thing. I really believe in that. So all of these factors built up in my decision to take the leap to found Omnisent in July 2025.
I think one of the things that is a through line of some of the things that we're going to talk about is this notion that founders have to have had it all figured out, right? Like you have to be the visionary, you have to be the person that does everything. But you have ostensibly had a good experience working with us and getting those outside perspectives. What's your overall thought about that, and how have you engaged experts in different parts of your business to get feedback as you've moved forward?
Yeah, the having it figured all out is is a real thing, was a real thing for me in the first kind of 6 months, especially because you want to present as confident to potential partners, potential co-founders, potential investors. Even the first time that I met you two, I needed to paint a picture of what was possible, even though I didn't know who would be building it, who we'd be building it for, if people would pay for it. So that's a lot of that's a lot of ambiguity. At Amazon, in addition to the famous leadership principles, one thing that many people in the public don't know that deals with ambiguity is a major aspect around the fit discussion in hiring at Amazon. So if someone is giving flags that they have trouble dealing with ambiguity, probably they're not going to be a great fit in a fast moving team during reorgs, reinventions, pivots, things like that. So I think that the conditioning that I experienced going through 9.5 years of career at Amazon AWS helped me face that with a bit more courage. Although doing it on your own, on your own name, without a nice like company email address, it really means putting yourself out there. So yeah, for sure, Jennifer, I was struggling a bit with rejection and remembering that rejection is input to the next iteration. And I've all now seen that cycle a few times. So we're having success. We're also having challenge, but I think that I've seen that a few times now. So I'm building my confidence up as I go.
There's a fine line between fake it until you make it and also being open to outside perspectives. I think you got to teeter right on the edge there.
Yeah. What helped me from the RTP perspective was taking a data-driven approach, saying, hey, Neil, you've had 3 discovery conversations. Imagine once we've had 7, 8, 9, 10 discovery conversations, keep seeking feedback from the market. And I think we're going to talk about how that market in versus product out perspective was a major unlock for me. It gave me permission to go into discovery calls, realizing that I didn't need to close the sale there. I wasn't there to close the sale. I was there to understand the problem space and give myself line of sight to building something that adds value.
Yeah, let's actually dig into that a little bit. So in the early days, your pitch was all about tech and architecture, right?
Yeah.
As you had it in your mind that you were selling to the CTO because that was a persona that you were comfortable selling to. And back to your AWS selling days. Let's talk about how that original pitch morphed itself no more into a market in versus product out approach. And how has that felt for you to also make that pitch adjustment, or just even going away from pitching, just listening first?
Absolutely. I think one clear example of that was an investor I approached after seeing them speak on stage at an industry event. And this investor had been speaking on a panel about contextual engagement and audience activation. And these are sweet spots for us. And I had written down a bunch of notes. I was like, this is great. This investor is going to definitely be interested to talk with me. So I walked up with confidence, approached, shook their hand after they had a chance to catch their breath. And they asked me, what are you building? And I said something like, next generation decision engine for AI workflows in marketing. And the investor looked at me like I was from a different planet and just gave me like that East Coast kind of like, what? You know, that very brusque, like to the point East Coast, what? And I didn't have a follow-up. Like I didn't have a strong reframe or like a one line on top of that. Whatever I said next didn't really land. So coming out of that, I really started to think, who can help me reframe this? Because I see the market opportunity, I see how the technology connects, but I need to know how to communicate, establish shared understanding, and speak my customer's language instead of my old language that had worked for me as a technology salesperson at AWS.
Interesting. So tell us a little bit more about how that evolved. So started with this very tech heavy, I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm building, didn't land. Where did we go from there?
Absolutely. I spoke with a 10-year industry veteran in a safe space, pitched him one-on-one. It was a warm intro via a friend. And he said, what I'm hearing you say, if I've understood it correctly, is really exciting. And I can think of a bunch of customers to refer you to. Have I understood you that A, B, and C? So we had this kind of 60-minute coming to Jesus session where I walked out with a much better understanding of what the demand signals from my market were. And then I was able to bring that to speak with the two of you. And we have since reconstructed from the ground up the value proposition, the key pain points that we address, how we address them, and how to communicate that. So now I feel equipped, like I've got a full deck of cards to play with instead of really struggling to reframe for the right audience.
Yeah. We came to you and said, let's try to take a market in approach, not a product out approach. What did that initially mean to you? And did you understand what the feedback we were attempting to give to you?
I had like an emotional release when we talked about that, to be honest, because I had been feeling very like stiff and brittle in my approach. And I was seeing things as like success or failure. And what the market in reframed it for me was gave me permission not to have all the answers and to need to evangelize my product before I'd even established product market fit. Because I have grown up seeing founders on stage in prestigious places, I thought that it was my job to put the little headset mic on, like stride onto the stage. It's a lot better building with this market in rather than product out approach. I can lean into the kind of agility, the kind of prototyping, rapid iteration that I always knew would work for me, going back to having read Lean Startup, having worked with startups. So I think that was the point where it started to make sense for me of hypothesis testing, running small, quick experiments, doubling down on what makes sense. And Jennifer said something really that stuck with me, which was like that you can't bully the market into seeing it your way. And that again just was like a release for me because it gave me permission not to convince the customer, hey, you're screwed if you don't do it like I'm telling you. that conversation could go something different. I hear that you're hitting scaling constraints and you're looking for ways to solve that without linear hiring. Here's what that could look like. And that's a more collaborative conversation. That's a conversation that can repeat and scale sustainably with different organizations as well.
Yeah, that is something I'm very fond of saying. I think if I look back in my go-to-market career, 201, every successful product launch I've ever been a part of has been successful because we listened to the market first. And I think that's such a flip from, as you said, right? You want to put on the headset and go on stage and you want to be this visionary, but also it's just way easier to listen to people and give them what they're looking for. So I think it's interesting that flip in approach has influenced a little bit both of roadmap and in messaging. It also seems like it's given you an opportunity to tap into some of your really great like enterprise rep skills because you're really good at asking questions and getting to the need behind the need. What was the big, like you had this kind of emotional reaction, this aha moment. What happened next?
What happened next was we started getting qualified meetings with customers and converting those into qualified opportunities and knowing why and understanding. I remember a particular meeting with a CTO. I think it was like an 8-minute discovery, 12-minute discovery in a dedicated conference room at the event. And we just knew exactly what questions to ask. And we understood exactly what each of his responses meant. Myself and a BD advisor who's 10 years in the industry, who made the warm intro. Once it started to feel like my pattern recognition was kicking in, I was seeing, okay, these are the common pain points, these are the common challenges. And then I did feel like, weirdly, I did feel like a visionary at that point because I was able to see my analysis of the market dynamic and the technology trends is lining up with the customer pain points, is then lining up with my messaging. And that's why we were getting second conversations. We were getting proof of concept artifacts we would deliver. And then we were setting up our first paid pilot engagement, which just wrapped at the end of last month.
Yeah, I think that's a very crucial point, right? I think, myself and Jennifer working with a number of founders, what we see is often that the founders tries really hard to push their perspective and to make the prospective customer understand their perspective, right? And, there's a lot of consumer psychology that goes into obviously buying and selling, which you're very much aware of. And oftentimes when it comes to B2B selling, what they want is a relationship with you before they even start talking about business. So when you go in with the intent to just listen and understand, what you're doing is you're making them feel heard and you're putting their problems first, for you put yourself and your product first. And then from there, you understand how to position your product to best meet their needs by listening to them and building rapport with them before selling to them. And that's a transition that I've watched you make while analyzing all of your calls. And so let's talk about when you made that shift and you landed your first pilot, right? Because I remember we had a hard time getting from stage 0 to stage 1, and now you're crushing stage 1s, getting into early pilot conversations now. So now that you've taken this new marketing approach, you're listening first before pushing your product. And then now tell us a story about getting your first pilot, which was a big moment for you.
Absolutely. Timing, finding the right early believers to become first adopters, I find really challenging because you need to wait someone who's already successful to take a risk on you when you're a startup, especially for a startup selling to SMB or enterprise. So they have a selection of vendors available that are way more established than you, that have way more marketing budget than you, that are way more visible than you. So if you are not better than the competition at listening, at understanding, at speaking your prospects' language, at relating, building that traction step by step, you will not get to a pilot phase like we had done. It was funny from like a funnel perspective because we were trying a few different things to attract prospects into the funnel. Our advisor reposted one of my LinkedIn posts, and this was not even one of my best posts. This was not even one of my best posts, but it hit right before a major conference, and two people liked it immediately, like within 20 minutes, and they were both highly qualified prospects. So I did personal one-on-one outreach to those prospects to start a conversation and positioned a meeting in person at this upcoming conference. So this is what I mean by timing, follow through, confidence. When I did the meeting, it was over lunch, actually. It was related to the conference, but it was just lunch, and we had a really good time. Initially, they said this is not a good time for us to run a pilot. We have a lot of internal technical migration going on. We are ingesting some new acquisitions that we've made. And this approach as well, because it's using AI to complement humans, it could be controversial for the team. There could be pushback in the team. But despite all of these factors, we landed a paid 30-day pilot with this customer. And it really came down to the follow-up conversation from that lunch with the other director. So the first director positioned us internally. We shared some emails, we shared some collateral. And at first the client said, no, not right now. But because we had this kind of internal champion, he helped us reframe the offer in this kind of low, no risk, zero integration, a zero dev integration required. And they were like tantalized by the upside. So when I reframed this and my second proposal, it moved really quickly within 1 week to starting a paid pilot.
That's spectacular. And that has opened the door for some other opportunities. And as before the podcast, we were chatting about the customer calls, and they've just been coming fast and furious. So once you had that kind of one proof of concept, it's really taken off from there. Yeah.
Yeah, we operate in a regulated industry with some of our revenue streams. So it's when you have referenceable customer cases, those names speak louder than your pitch, right? So there is also like a FOMO aspect. We talked about there's competitor FOMO, like their competitors didn't want to miss on this new technology upside. Their partners don't want to miss on it. And then we've now cross-sold internally to different teams in different regions or different product families, because we're like, this other product family loves us. Do you want to check us out too? And we're already under MNDA. We're already through their vendor onboarding process. So we're like a known vetted quantity at that point. I think it's pretty encouraging that as a startup, we've been able to land some early enterprise engagements.
So I think we can look now to a little bit of the future, but one of the things that you say is that you talk about falling in love with the problem space instead of the solution, and that's been part of that reframing for you. What is that? Talk a little bit more about that. What does that look like day to day? What advice would you give on that concept for other founders? Like, give us the philosophy.
Yeah. So I read a book by Melissa Perry, who's a thought leader in product management. And I also had a chance to see her speak live in Hamburg, which was excellent. She wrote a book called Escaping the Build Trap, which is ostensibly for product people, but every founder is a product person. There were some things there that really stuck with me. And my favorite point she made was, do not fall in love with your solution. Fall in love with a problem that you just can't shake. Fall in love with a problem that your mind keeps coming back to with ideas or angles or experiments you want to run. And that's what I've found with Omnisent. So I'm really trying to cherish that, lean into that, because whether we're selling to marketing agencies or sports books or media broadcasting, they all have the same sort of challenge. And I find that challenge fascinating, which is how can we make sports experiences more compelling based on what the audience actually cares about? And so that kind of led me realized that I needed to take a step back from my initial framing on what the product is or what the product does, even though we had built some really cool stuff and we had shipped some really cool code and features. I actually needed to reset, take on board what customers were saying to me. And that's where RTP and your jobs to be done analysis really helped me, because I started to obsess not over, is it an API or is it a CSV? Is it a dashboard or is it like this kind of thing? And instead, I was obsessed over, man, if they want to start covering NBA, are they just going to hire 12 more people to do that? And what happens when the games are in a different time zone? Are they going to wake up at 4 in the morning to cover the World Cup? Yeah, and it turns out today customers wake up at 4 in the morning to cover the North American World Cup here in Europe. So yeah, by staying in love with the problem space, I'm putting myself shoulder to shoulder with decision makers and my users. So if I'm delighting users and they vote to continue from the pilot, then I'm doing a good job as a product owner.
How has how has your thoughts about shaping your roadmap changed since taking like a market in listening first approach? And how has that changed since before you really started taking more of a market in approach?
It's really banging my head against the wall. Like I feel, I think, and I'm sure other founders have this feeling that, so in my incubator program, they even told us that you will feel like you've had a glimpse of the future and you've like time traveled into the past and you're trying to show people the newspaper from the future, but they don't believe you. That's really what my sales calls were feeling like. And I was like, I was starting to doubt myself. And I was like, what I'm hearing them say on stage and what I'm pitching them lines up, but they're actually not there yet. So we currently have been seeing a big hype cycle around AI and AI expansion. And I realized that what companies were broadcasting in their press releases, in their on-stage conferences about their level of AI maturity didn't always match the reality on the ground for teams. So I was very naive about that. So I think what I needed to do was understand, oh, okay, I don't need to sell them on the future. I need to sell them on how their week gets better. I, and that's something I don't even need to sell you on. If I come to you and I'm like, hey, would you like to have your week be 80% less annoying and spend more quality time doing what you love and doing what you do best? Would you be interested? And that's like what we're pitching now when we talk to teams. And it's way more fun than saying, look, you have to do this because it's inevitable. Or look, you have to do this because you told the market you were doing it. So now you have to do it. Like, that sucks.
Yeah, one thing that I always tell people is that customers buy for present value and investors invest in future value. So if you're pitching a vision of the future to a customer, they're thinking, I have problems right now. I don't need to know about what you're going to solve 6 to 12 months from now. I have problems today that need solving. And then also when you take that market in approach, you start to hear that, and that's then how your positioning changes and your roadmap changes to solve today's problems. But then you still understand your vision of the future to then go pitch to people who want to. So yeah, definitely sounds like you began to understand like the difference between the two storytelling philosophies about how you're going to earn capital. Like one, you earn from your customers by solving their problems, and two, you earn from investors by having a clear vision of the future and how you want to evolve your product and your.
Yeah. And I'm bullish on both cases now, because now that I've talked to customers and I've talked to investors and I've been to the conferences and I'm reading the right people, I can see both those storylines much more clearly than even 2 or 3 months ago.
From the perspective of advice you have for folks who are in similar positions, if you were talking to a founder who said, you know, my product is great, but my sales conversations keep dying, I keep getting that what reaction, what would your advice be?
First question would be, what do users say? Not decision makers. When you've shown this to someone who would be a user, what questions did they ask? What did they light up about versus what didn't land? because I think that shows like a value creation mechanism lies. We can discuss and debate reducing cogs and increasing this and decreasing that and arrows up and down, and we can have an academic and business discussion about that. But I'm more interested if users get excited when they're exposed to the product, because I think keeping your nose on that and following that is going to help you unlock how to present in the next sales conversation. My favorite thing to do is share quotes from customers with prospects. Like a customer told me that right now they're doing this based on intuition and that their intuition is often wrong. And for me, selling like a data-driven decision intelligence platform, I'm not saying, hey, you're often wrong. Your intuition is poor. Yeah, I know that data is good, but I can say when I showed this to reference customer, they were excited about this because they said they're often deciding based on intuition today, and that intuition is often wrong. And that just lands very differently. So that's why I would say the product to more users, just to get these kind of quotes. And RTP do a fantastic job of taking these kind of call transcripts and gleaning these kind of magic moments and key insights and patterns over time, so that you can really start to work programmatically, so that you can work on this kind of pattern. And I think that's going to help me go from my kind of 2 customers, 3 customers situation into my next 3, next 5, next.
Yeah, that the jobs to be done analysis. I started that because when I first started working at LinkedIn, it was the first company where like getting customer interviews wasn't so difficult. And so I started getting a large number of interviews. And this is like before AI. So I'll just have like raw transcript that I didn't have to parse through manually and then go create these snapshots from. But then getting up to 20 customers to speak to me and get product feedback that easy, which means the hard part was how to organize all of this feedback into something that's like meaningful for my product positioning and also for my colleague in product who needed that input for roadmapping. But that's the intent, is for you to see where all the magic moments within that conversation. And then to not only do that, but see those patterns over a handful of calls to see what is the market actually asking of me. And then that goes into your roadmap. So I actually just gave you a pretty like gnarly report about all of your conversations as they relate to the product of Omnisent, and also how your performance has been as a salesperson. What's been your feedback now after taking a quick glance at those reports? That is a combination of all of your conversations back since October.
So when I got those reports from you, I was sitting in the sun in Berlin, drinking a really good smoothie, and it was like early spring day. I was waiting to meet 2 of my team members for lunch. And those reports just struck me. I felt like a real sense of like this was a milestone. This was a milestone because I had lived that arc that you described and that you quantified in the doc. As a founder, these successes can be few and far between, like landing the first customer, the second customer. If I'm only getting that as my like emotional payoff, that's really rough. I'm like out in the desert. But seeing this continuous progress and also seeing like actions and improvements, which I'm excited to take, that made me feel like there was this kind of connective wire between my first conversations and now. And that was really meaningful to me because I know that outcomes and obsessing on outcomes is not a way to be successful long-term in sales. You need to focus on what you can control and work on your inputs to outputs. So this really quantified my inputs and my input quality over time. And I'd never seen something like that.
You need some dopamine somewhere. And as you're in this process building, even if what you're looking at is just, oh my goodness, this is how far we've come in 6 months in terms of how we're gleaning insights or how the pitch is landing or what we've gotten. that's a nice moment of validation to say, whoa, look at all these things that I have done. Yeah.
And imagine I can share this. It also helps me express to an investor or like a potential co-founder, here's the trajectory we're on, and here's why. I won't show that whole doc, but now I'm able to storytell around that. Say, in the beginning, it was like this, then we started doing it like that, and now here's where we are because we did that. And knowing why you've been successful is way more repeatable, scalable, and sustainable than being super lucky or having a big break. So you need that too, but you want to be ready to seize the opportunity when you do get that break.
So we're about getting close to the end of our time. A little bit of shameless plug time. So you've mentioned that like our analysis and our quantitative approach has really attracted you to come work with us, which for us, that's how we believe, that's like the center of our growth philosophy and our growth methodology. How has your ideas changed on having growth advisors now since we've worked together for close to a year now versus before? And what would you say to anyone, any founders who might be watching this or on the fence about hiring RTP? What would you say to them?
Yeah. Well, we've talked about the great insights and the great work that you've done, but I also have to mention the consistency and the consistent respect that you've shown me in my founder journey, giving me space when I needed it, offering advice when I asked for it, and also challenging when I asked for it. So I think that considering a partnership, it has to be about trust. It has to be about mutual understanding and goals alignment. So I've really felt that with you and with Jennifer since I started. So yeah, I just want to emphasize to founders who are evaluating who you bring in, who you bring close. Uh, Obviously, you need to work with super smart, sharp people that are the best at what they do, but also, do you trust them? Have you built trust? And that's why I continue as well working with RTP, not only because of a report or an insight, but because of that trust.
I think that's a great point, though, in terms of building that trust as you build out your team. I think now we'll give you an opportunity to shamelessly plug what you've got coming up next. If people want to find you or connect with you, where do they find out what's going on with Omnisent? Give us all the details.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me, Neil Metzler, on LinkedIn. I'm also on Substack, so you can find my newsletter via my LinkedIn profile. It's called Neil Founded a Startup. That messaging is because a lot of my tribe, a lot of my community are big tech folks from all the FANG companies. And I wanted to show and shine a light that if you are thinking that maybe you won't have that opportunity to take a leap into entrepreneurship, I've talked about some of the trade-offs that I've navigated and also the freedom that it's given me. So yeah, I would love for you to connect and follow me on Substack. It's Neil Founded a Startup. Yeah, and of course, Omnisent, you can find us at Omnisent.io. That's OMNISENT.io if you're interested to learn more about the solution. And yeah, would be happy to connect with you and hear more about what you're working on when it comes to social sentiment in sports.
So, Neil, thank you so much for your time today. This has been such an incredible conversation. And for anyone listening, we'll make sure that all Neil's links are in the description. Either one of you, any last parting thoughts?
Neil, I would love to hear from you. Like, one, what do you think the next Captain's Log episode should be about? What would you be interested in hearing from us? And two, what are you looking forward to working with RTP for the next 9 months, maybe for the rest of the previous 9 months?
I'm excited about both of those. So I would love to hear you go in depth with someone about before and after a pivot, because I know that we didn't get to talk about one of my pivots on here. And I think that is so liberating for founders to hear about that there is a promised land after a pivot. A pivot is not a failure. It's a fail fast reconfigure, right? And in the next 9 months, let's capture this category. We're going to take the market by storm. We understand what we're doing now. We understand why it's great for customers. We understand why customers love it. in their own words. So I'm excited to bring more people aboard and really work with more customers, especially around the World Cup, around NFL 2026, around the NBA finals, around tennis, golf. We have a very aggressive roadmap, and I'm excited to connect more people to Omniscient.
Let's keep growing.
Yeah, let's keep growing.
Something great together, as we always say. Amazing.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil.
Yeah. Thank you, Quentin. Thank you, Jennifer.
Have a great afternoon.